Hello, and welcome to another episode of Pod to Profit. I'm Abby.
I'm Liz.
And we are so excited that this podcast is off and rolling. And we are going to dive into a topic today that is near and dear to my heart.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's important as any business owner or anyone that has a brand to start thinking about who, not how. That is one of the books that I recommended in my book club. And the reason I think it's so important to share this from the beginning is, Abby, I love you, but remember, you are on a whole different tech level than 99.9% of the world. And so if someone is listening to this and they're like, oh my God, this is so much work, there's no way I can't start a podcast. Abby died laughing when I told her, I'm like, hey, here's what we need to talk about in our first or one of our early episodes. We need to talk about, hiring it out versus DIY, because I don't know the difference between an MP3 and an MP4. And I literally don't. What?
You texted that to me. I was in a public space surrounded by people, and I look at that and I had to choke back the liquid that was in my mouth.
Well, because I know I saved these videos as an MP4 and an MP3 player was like my iPod, right?
Yes. So an MP3 file is it's not low quality, but it's the lower quality audio file. MP3 is audio, MP4 is video.
Oh yeah, no clue.
We'll get.
I finally know what a JPG is.
A JPEG.
Yes. Anyway, my point is, if this is a foreign language to you, look at me. I literally have a podcast for a living, and I don't know what the hell that is.
Is this the correct time to disclose the story of when you first bought your own gear?
Oh, God. Yes, go for it.
So Liz bought her own gear because she had gotten to the point where she was ready to record on her own and not have me in the room with her. And she's like, I just can't figure out. It says it's not reading the SD card. The SD card is in there. What is going on?
So we FaceTimed.
And you had bought a micro SD card for a normal SD card slot, which is fine, but you had the adapter in there without the micro SD card in the adapter. So you just had a piece of plastic in there.
How am I supposed to know? So it really is okay. If this seems like, I'm not techie, I'm not this, I'm not that, it's okay. You can figure it out. So we're going to walk through deciding what makes the most sense for you, hiring out versus DIY from the very start.
So first of all, let's get into the cost of podcasting, because it's not totally free. There's definitely some costs involved with this. And there are some non-negotiable things. You need to have some sort of distribution platform, whether that is a free one, I believe Spotify for podcasters is free, but it only distribution to Spotify is easy. Everywhere else it's a little more complex. I'm a big fan of the RSS feed, which is what I encourage all of my clients to use because it makes distribution so easy, but there is a cost associated with it. It's I
think it's $12 a month.
Yeah, if you pay yearly, it's $12 a month. If you go month by month, it's $14.
Yeah.
So
I've got 2 or 3 of them. So anyway, so I think that, we're going to do a whole episode on the actual equipment, microphones, headphones, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's probably going to be multiple episodes. Mm-hmm. Abby will tell you exactly which ones, why they're better than others.
So in addition to your distribution system, there's also going to be costs associated with things like editing software. Now, you can do this stuff for free. Things like, I want to say it's Audacity is a free editing software. GarageBand comes on Apple products. That's a free editing software. Or you can move up in the world. I use Adobe Audition. It's $25 to $30 a month, that sort of thing. And then I'm a huge fan of the brand Riverside. And that is a editing software that's a few $100s a year, but it gets the job done. And there's a lot of really great things because that platform is built for podcasters, but all those things come at a price. It's not free to do everything you need to do.
The thing is too, I am getting better. I will tell you that, but I still say a lot of, so, and Abby cuts those out for me versus you don't have to edit everything completely smoothing. You could just upload it, but the fact is, a better sounding audio, a smoother transition is going to sound way better. I've actually had friends tell me they heard me on other people's episodes And I'm not as good when I'm on other people's podcasts because I don't have Abby editing me. But again, it's trying to improve. It's trying to get better, but my delivery is not as perfect as I want it to be. And that's why having that manual actual person edit it for me made a lot more sense.
Yeah, and kind of a topical thing, Kylie Kelsey, Jason Kelsey's wife, just started her podcast, and I was listening to the first episode, so excited about it. Whoever's editing her podcast isn't taking out her ums and uhs and stutters. Crazy, right? Because she is making some major money off of doing this podcast, but the person editing it is not editing it, at least in a way that I would deem as acceptable, which is
So if you're
crazy.
listening, Kylie Kelsey, call Abby.
I did put out a thing on TikTok about that. So along with paying for audio editing subscriptions, there's also video editing. Now you can buy things like Final Cut Pro is a one-time cost, or if you're using the app, they made that subscription based now. So there's that for like a paid version. I do the paid version of CapCut. I have Adobe Premiere, which is another $20-$30 a month. But there's also free tools. iMovie is free to use. The free version of CapCut. If you really want to try, you could edit on TikTok if you absolutely needed to. Would not recommend it, but it's there as an option if you absolutely have to.
I think that looking at it as what is your total cost going to be? And the fact is, for me, to hire Abby to do it just makes way more sense. And we're going to get into, assessing your resources and the expectations of your audience. But initially, when I look at those costs, Abby has a Riverside subscription that she can use and spread out between me and her other 6 or 7 clients. Divided up that way, I'm not paying for it twice. And so if I were to try to edit these things myself, first of all, if I'm going to do it on the free version and it's just my time, it's not going to be as good. So now you're paying a professional that can do it quicker, and she could do it even better because she has access to that better software. So I don't know. There's pros and cons to all of it, but just keep in mind that, and again, we're going to have episodes about this in the future, but just when I look at it as what resources I have available to me, yes, you can take things yourself on, your iPhone or whatever. But when we have the camera, it turns out so much better.
So let's get into going DIY versus hiring someone like me who can help you with the process of creating a podcast. It's all about assessing what you have to work with. Do you have more time or do you have more money?
I think you have to look at what resources you have. And if you're starting out on this podcast, when you go back to our episode that we had earlier, our goal setting, do you have an existing business? Are you trying to enhance it? Whatever it might be. But what resources do you have available to get this up and going? And I think more importantly, are you interested in learning these skills yourself, or do you prefer to outsource? I don't care to know how to do some of this stuff. I don't want to know. There is so much shit going on in my brain. I don't have room for anything else. I don't want to learn how to do this. It's not fun to me. It's not enjoyable. There are other things that I would rather do. So it makes more sense, not even from a money standpoint, but from just a time standpoint. I don't want to spend my time editing these things. I love writing the outlines. I love recording. I love coming up with goals. I love connecting with the audience. But when it comes to actually editing the files themselves, first of all, I don't even know how to do it. So that learning curve would be absolute shit. And then, but also, even if I just don't want to learn how to do it.
Throw back to the day that you called me not too long ago and it's like, help me work with iMovie.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's like you gotta want to know how to do some of this stuff. And if you don't want to, find someone who does.
Exactly.
Because there's people like me everywhere who enjoy it and have been doing it since they figured out how to turn on their family computer back in 2010.
I think also, if you're going to look at DIY versus hiring help, look at your audience expectations. So for me, on my Flower Farmer Forum podcast, my main podcast that brings in the revenue, and we share how that happens later, but there's a lot of ways that I monetize that podcast. But audio is the main priority. My audience, my target listeners, don't really care about the video. I will put a little bit of a teaser about the episode on my Instagram reel, but I already have a pretty solid audience there from my Instagram and then just the podcast itself. Everyone's subscribed to it, so they know when a new episode comes out. And it is such a specific topic that it's not like this podcast where we're trying to constantly attract new people. I mean, yes, we are, but I think that my main priority is going to be that audio. And so if I'm standing in my office at my sit to stand desk and my door is in the background on the Zoom video that Abby cuts the reel, that's just fine. People are used to it. They know she throws my logo up top. I actually have a logo that is recognizable. It's brand recognition. That's fine. Whereas in contrast, the Back to Better podcast or this podcast, when we are building a platform for me as an author or a speaker, those high quality video clips and engaging visuals are really essential for social media. And so I think, new podcasters, if you're starting from scratch, you are going to need reels and something visually appealing content to build the audience.
And the long form video, like for starting from scratch, like us, starting from scratch with this, having the long form video to throw on YouTube, to put on Facebook, to embed into blogs, having that as an option for, this is new to everyone. It's not just new to an audience that's already had the audio. Like this is brand spanking new. So having the video as a companion to the audio, I think it's only going to help. Taking a peek behind our gold glitter curtain here for all of our visual listeners. What's it like to work with a producer and what's kind of the cost associated with that? So when you work with a producer, either they're like me and they're coming to you, or maybe they have a dedicated set up studio space. I know a producer up in Duluth who has a whole studio dedicated to his clients, and that's something that on the goal list for 2025 for me. But it's going to come at a cost. Like you're either going to have to rent the studio space or that's going to be tied into your producer's package that you're working with them on. So just something to keep in mind if you're thinking, okay, I can maybe DIY it for a little bit, but long term, I'm going to want someone to help me. Know that that's going to come with a cost.
Well, and you can get that professional quality equipment, the microphones, the headphones, the tripods, whatever it might be. My desktop that I ended up buying, it has a really, really nice camera on it. It has a really good, I have my pod track that I plug into my computer. I still have a pretty good professional audio. For whatever reason, for a while, it was not working. And you can tell if you go back to my early episodes in my podcast, there are some really echoey episodes. You did what you could with them. But again, that only lasts you for so long. And so for me, my experience, we're going to do a whole episode on this, but to keep it short, I basically will write the outlines for the episodes. I have a running list of what my next episode is. I will record 3 or 4 of them at a time within Zoom so that there's a video, but I plug my microphone and my headphones into my computer so the audio is really good. And then I put them all in the Google Drive and once a month, and that's literally what I do. Abby makes the video, makes the audio, creates an Instagram reel, creates a blog, publishes it on my website, distributes it all out. I don't have to upload it to RSS, none of that. And so honestly, like the number of hours I put into actually making the podcast itself and making the episodes, it's really just the creative part. And that's super fun for me. And that's all I want to do.
And as a producer, that's my goal. Like when I initially meet with someone, when they send me a message saying, hey, I want to learn more, that's always what I lead with is I want you to have the fun. I want you to be able to go in with your creativity and your expertise and create an amazing piece of content. But then I want you to not have to worry about it because I want to be the person that can take on the technical responsibilities. I have the time commitment for it. And you just don't got to worry about it. You just get to have the fun part of what everyone thinks a podcast is. And then I take it from there.
Well, and I think that to me, it just keeps the pressure off of it so much. I have a private podcast. It's basically, an additional, almost like a mastermind or group coaching in the background that goes to my subscribers, more or less. And I try to keep them really short. I try not to make Abby have to edit them too much. They're a lot more real, but there's just pressure associated with it to not mess up so that you don't have to do too much editing. Whereas I know that real life's going to happen. My kids are going to run in while I'm recording, whatever it might be. I can just in the middle of my episode pause, or if I'm interviewing a guest and I can say, hey, my producer's great. We are not uploading this raw. If you are halfway through answering a question, or if you say, hey, hold on, I want to think about that for a minute, we can do that. So I think it just, honestly, for me, it keeps it fun. I knew what my goals were going to be when I started my podcast. Yes, of course, Abby is taking on new clients, but there are so many other podcast producers as well that might be a better fit for what they offer or what they do or what their package might be. But basically, what are your goals? And look at it from there. What do you have more resources of? What is the intention? Can you afford to hire anyone?
That's a big question to ask yourself. And I think that leads us perfectly into our takeaways from this episode. So revisit those goals. Like, what are you exactly trying to do with your podcast? Go and listen to the goal setting episode for sure. But are you trying to enhance an existing business? Do you have something that you're looking to add a podcast to, or are you starting from scratch?
Yeah. And what do you enjoy doing? Do you like editing? Do you like recording? Do you like brainstorming the content? Like, what do you want to spend your time doing? If you don't mind the editing piece of it, or if you can, multitask and you're able to do that, go for it. Or maybe you're someone that is a better speaker than I am and professionally can not have to gather your thoughts while you're doing it. Again, I'm getting better. I have a message to share. I don't look at myself as a speaker first. It's like I have a story and a brand and then I tell it. I think of it as like a storyteller rather than a speaker. And so my speaking skills, I never did speech in high school. I wish I would have, but I didn't.
But the thing about that too is you're always going to get better the more you do it. So that's definitely something to think about as well.
Yeah, so make sure you just start where you are. Free and DIY options are excellent for testing the waters if you're not sure that this is going to stick around. But otherwise, if you outsource those tasks, I'm going to tell you right now, you are going to save time. It's going to allow you to focus on growing your audience and your business. But just ask yourself, what do you have more of, time or money? It really is that simple, and choose accordingly.
And it's okay if that changes. Like if you start with more time than money, great. Use that time you have. And then if you get to the point of like, okay, I'm ready to outsource and find someone to help, take that next step. Don't be too afraid to reach out, even if it's just to ask questions.
Yeah. And so if you are DIYing or hiring out, we would love to hear things, love to hear how it's going for you, and make sure you follow along.